September 12, 1942. The cold waters of the South Atlantic rolled endlessly beneath a moonless sky. Somewhere in the darkness, the German submarine U-156 moved silently through the waves, hunting its prey. For hours, Korvettenkapitän Werner Hartenstein had shadowed a large British armed merchant cruiser from a safe distance. The submarine remained surfaced so it could match the vessel's speed, while Hartenstein carefully avoided being detected. Through his periscope, he watched the massive ship cut through the ocean, completely unaware that danger was closing in behind it. As night slowly settled across the Atlantic, several glowing cabin windows became visible on the ship despite blackout regulations. To Hartenstein, those lights were an invitation. A faint grin crossed his face. Success tonight could earn him another victory for Germany, perhaps even the prestigious Iron Cross. Inside the submarine, tension filled the air as sailors rushed into position. Target angle, 90 degrees, speed, 14 knots, range, 1,500 meters. Alarms echoed through the steel corridors of the U-boat as torpedoes were armed and prepared. Tube 1, fire! With a violent burst of compressed air, the first torpedo launched into the sea and sped toward the British vessel. Seconds later, Tube 3, fire! A second torpedo raced through the dark waters. Hartenstein stared through the scope, counting silently. Then, a towering column of water exploded upward as the first torpedo smashed directly into the center of the ship. The blast ripped open the cruiser's hull. Steel twisted apart as flames and debris burst into the night sky. Moments later, the second torpedo struck closer to the bow, shaking the vessel from end to end. The British ship began leaning heavily to starboard. On board the submarine, German sailors cheered loudly. Then the radio operator intercepted a distress call. Attention! Attention! The vessel sunk is the Laconia, 19,695 tons. The cheering grew even louder. The Laconia was an enormous prize, but Hartenstein understood something else too. Once that distress signal was transmitted, Allied aircraft and warships would soon flood the area. Still, instead of fleeing immediately, he decided to move closer. Slow ahead. Port 5 degrees. Cold ocean wind struck his face as he climbed onto the bridge of U-156. Through binoculars, he watched the burning vessel slowly dying in the darkness. Meanwhile, aboard the Laconia, panic had fully erupted. Men, women, and children scrambled desperately toward lifeboats while explosions echoed deep inside the ship. British sailor Jim McLaughlin clung tightly to a railing as the deck tilted beneath him. Everywhere he looked, terrified passengers screamed for help. The ship carried soldiers, civilians, women, children, and far more people than anyone on board realized. Jim glanced over the side toward the freezing ocean below. Jumping looked impossible. Instead, he carefully slid toward the lower side of the ship before dropping into the sea and swimming away from the sinking giant as fast as he could. Around him floated wreckage, oil, and desperate survivors fighting to stay alive. Then, through the darkness, he spotted a small wooden raft. Already clinging to it was his friend, Davy Jones. "Bloody hell, Jim, grab my hand." Davy hauled him aboard. Exhausted and shivering, the two men watched helplessly as the stern of the Laconia rose higher into the air. Massive propellers emerged from the water before the ship slowly disappeared beneath the Atlantic. Half a mile away, Hartenstein surveyed the devastation from the bridge of his submarine. The ocean was filled with overcrowded lifeboats and hundreds of survivors struggling in the water. Cries for help echoed through the darkness. Suddenly, two men clinging to floating debris shouted desperately toward the submarine. But something sounded strange. They weren't speaking English, they were speaking Italian. Hartenstein froze in confusion. Why would Italians be aboard a British ship? "Pull them aboard!" German sailors dragged the freezing men onto the deck. Shaking violently, the survivors pleaded with the captain. "Italians! Prisoners!" A wave of shock hit Hartenstein. The Laconia had been carrying Italian prisoners of war, Germany's own allies. Immediately, everything changed. Get more men out of the water. Soon another Italian survivor who spoke some German explained the horrifying truth. The Laconia had carried nearly 1,500 Italian POWs, along with British troops and hundreds of civilians, including women and children. Hartenstein stared silently at the sea. Every extra minute in the area increased the risk of Allied attack. His standing orders were clear: leave immediately. But he could not abandon innocent people to die. Finally, he turned toward the radio operator. Send a message to U-Boat Command. Request permission to conduct rescue operations. Far away from the submarine, Jim and Davy drifted helplessly through the burning heat of the next day. Salt covered their skin. Their lips cracked from thirst. Jim lowered one leg into the water for relief, then suddenly screamed in pain. A long silver shape vanished beneath the raft. Blood poured from deep wounds in his calf. A giant barracuda circled below them, then more shadows appeared beneath the water. Jim clutched his injured leg against his chest while staring hopelessly at the empty horizon. No ships, no planes, nothing. Then, faintly, they heard an engine. A German submarine emerged in the distance. Jim's heart pounded as sailors climbed onto the deck near the machine gun. He thought they were about to be executed, but instead, one sailor coiled a rope and threw it toward them. "Catch it, Englishman!" Hartenstein had received permission to rescue survivors. German sailors pulled the raft alongside the submarine and hauled the exhausted British men aboard. Looking up at his rescuers, Jim was stunned to see smiles instead of hatred. "Well," one German sailor joked, "we couldn't leave you floating out there forever." Jim became one of dozens of Allied survivors brought aboard U-156. Over the following days, the submarine remained near the disaster site, collecting survivors from every direction: Italian prisoners, British soldiers, Polish troops, women, and children. The submarine became dangerously overcrowded. Survivors packed every available compartment, while others crowded the deck itself. Still, Hartenstein refused to abandon them. To create more room, 4 lifeboats were tied behind the submarine, but dragging them slowed U-156 almost to a crawl, making the vessel an easy target. The German captain broadcast repeated rescue messages over open radio frequencies. "If any ship assists the survivors of the Laconia, I will not attack, provided I am not attacked first." But danger was already approaching. One afternoon, a lookout suddenly shouted, "Aircraft approaching! Starboard side!" An American B-24 Liberator bomber appeared overhead, circling low above the submarine. At the controls was Lieutenant James Hardin of the United States Army Air Forces. From only a few hundred feet above the water, Hardin could clearly see survivors covering the submarine's deck and lifeboats being towed behind it. "Raise the Red Cross flag." German sailors quickly stretched a massive Red Cross banner across the deck gun. "Everybody down!" The submarine crew and survivors flattened themselves against the deck while waiting anxiously. The bomber continued circling. For a moment, it looked like the aircraft would leave peacefully. Relieved, Hartenstein ordered a captured RAF officer onto the deck. Using an Aldous lamp, the officer flashed a message toward the American aircraft. "RAF officer speaking from German submarine. Survivors on board, civilians, women, children." Inside the bomber, confusion spread among the American crew. They struggled to fully understand the message. The only word they clearly recognized was German. The Liberator flew back toward Ascension Island to contact commanders at Wide Awake Airfield. Lieutenant Hardin explained the bizarre situation over the radio. The response came after a tense silence. "This could be a German trap. Sink the submarine immediately." Hardin hesitated briefly, then obeyed. The Liberator turned sharply and headed back toward U-156. Down below, the crowded submarine waited, helplessly. Bomb bay doors open. The bomber descended lower and lower toward the ocean. Survivors on deck waved frantically, screaming and raising their arms. But the aircraft kept coming. "Get down!" Bombs dropped toward the submarine. Huge columns of water exploded beside U-156, drenching everyone on board. The bomber circled back for another run. Hartenstein knew the truth instantly. If the submarine stayed on the surface, everyone would die. But diving meant abandoning hundreds of survivors. It was an impossible choice. Finally, he gave the order. "Cut the lifeboats loose." German sailors hacked desperately through the thick ropes with axes while the Liberator returned overhead. Another bomb fell, this time striking directly beside one of the lifeboats. The explosion tore the boat apart instantly. Men vanished beneath shattered wood and burning debris. Hartenstein stared in horror. Then another bomb exploded beneath the submarine itself. The blast lifted U-156 violently from the sea. Inside the control room, alarms screamed as seawater flooded compartments and battery acid leaked through the vessel. There was no longer any choice. "Everyone off the deck! Dive preparations!" Panic erupted as survivors jumped into the ocean. Jim fought through waves before finally reaching another overcrowded lifeboat. Beside him, the damaged submarine slowly prepared to disappear beneath the sea. Captain Hartenstein emerged one final time from the conning tower. He looked toward the survivors and shouted, "Head north-northeast. Africa is 700 miles away. Good luck." Then he saluted them. Moments later, U-156 slipped beneath the Atlantic waves and vanished forever into the darkness. The survivors drifted at sea for nearly 24 days. Many died from starvation, dehydration, exhaustion, and shark attacks before rescue finally came near the coast of Liberia. Out of nearly 2,800 people aboard the Laconia, fewer than half survived. Captain Werner Hartenstein himself would be killed the following year during another Atlantic patrol in 1943. The tragedy also changed submarine warfare forever. After the attack on U-156, German Admiral Karl Dönitz issued what became known as the Laconia Order, forbidding German U-boats from rescuing survivors in future battles. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story and want more powerful World War II history content, make sure to subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, and share this video with fellow history fans. Your support helps us bring these incredible true stories to life. The Laconia incident remains one of the most tragic and controversial moments of the Second World War. A moment where humanity briefly appeared in the middle of brutal warfare, only to be shattered once again by fear, confusion, and the chaos of war.